You're listening to the Jefferson Exchange. Thanks for joining us. The JX starts today with the debrief, where JPR reporters discuss the stories they've been covering this week, including our series about the 5th anniversary of the Almeda Fires. I'm Maria Carter, JPR's news director.
I'm Emma J. Nelson, JPR's intern for the summer.
I'm Jane Vaughn, housing, homelessness, and education reporter.
And I'm Justin Higginbottom, public health and safety reporter.
And Emma J., you covered the Gateway Transitional Housing Project this week as part of our Almeda coverage. Tell us, what exactly was that project?
Yeah, so the Gateway Project was one of the City of Talent's responses to the fire. Nearly 700 students in the Phoenix Talent School District had lost their homes in the blaze, and their families had to travel pretty far outside of district boundaries to find shelter. So think of a 45-minute to an hour-long bus ride one way to get to school. No elementary schooler is going to want to sit through that.
I can verify that. That was a little shorter than my actual bus ride to school.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Instead, though, the City of Talent put together an RV site at the center of town to house 53 school district families at a time. And the project was put together remarkably quickly in the grand scheme of things. The first family moved in October of 2021, and kids there were within walking distance of some of those schools.
Okay, well, so how was this all put together?
It was a massive collaboration between state, county, city, and school district leaders, and, of course, neighbors. Everyone really banded together to make it a reality.
Okay.
Leading the charge, though, were Talent Mayor Darby Ayers Flood and Phoenix Talent School District Superintendent Brent Barry. Those two put their heads together very shortly after the fire to figure out how they could get students back within those district boundaries. They told me their response to the disaster was actually influenced by the fire in Paradise, California those years prior, because that had devastated that school district.
And they didn't want the exact same thing happening.
Exactly. They didn't want to see that happen again. And neither did the communities based on how much they contributed to the project. Local partners like Access and Talent Maker City also contributed to make that transition from home to emergency shelter to finally the Gateway Project as smooth as possible.
And so this was 53 trailers there, I think was the number. How did it go? Was it successful?
The organizers say it was. All of the trailers were filled with Phoenix Talent School Districts very quickly after those applications opened, and there was turnover as some households found permanent housing through the project's years. For instance, in the 18 months between February of 2023 and just this August, 86 families lived at Gateway.
Oh, wow.
And about 75% of them moved into permanent housing when they moved out. Access did warn, however, that even though this worked in Talent and it worked well, it might not be the solution everywhere.
Why is that?
Well, every disaster will impact a community differently, and each community will need a unique response. And I'd say, for one, the Gateway Project was quite unique to Talent.
Yeah, but, for some places it might not have as many students or places they might have other places to go.
Income, culture, all of these things will influence.
Well, what's next for the Gateway Project?
Yeah, so it actually came to a close last month. That was planned ahead of time. All of the remaining residents were told months ago that they needed to start to make their way out with the help of Access. Access even helped some of those residents who hadn't found permanent housing relocate the trailers that they were staying in, and the titles were transferred over to the residents. So it just became their own trailer instead of something that was owned and operated by Access. The mayor said the remaining trailers will be auctioned off, and the Talent Urban Renewal Agency are going to move forward with their previous plan for the property. They're the owners of the property. They will be creating a mixed commercial residential space, and the agency has said it wants to use that space to make affordable housing in the community. And that foundation has been laid with the infrastructure and all of the work that was already done on the property to make it viable for Gateway residents.
So they won't have to run the sewer lines and electrical. It'll all already be there.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, Emma J. Jane, you wrote a story this week about Royal Oaks Mobile Manor, a different RV park. First, give us some background on that development and what's been happening there.
Yeah, so that's a mobile home park in Phoenix, Oregon, technically right on the border with Medford, and it burned down in the 2020 Almeda Fire. So I've been covering this for a few years, but there's been sort of some missteps along the way, and it's taken almost 5 years for people to be able to move back in there after it burned. And so basically what happened, it burns down, Almeda Fire 2020. In 2021, the state had bought a bunch of modular homes to rebuild, which was kind of exciting at the time, using manufactured homes rather than traditional construction. So the idea was that would be quicker and easier to stand up than stick-built homes. But the state didn't have a site picked out for the homes at first. It took some time to find it. Eventually, they were going to put 118 of them at Royal Oaks, which had burned down. But then it took, 2 years by the time everything was getting set up and families had been picked and were getting ready to move in. And then the homes were found to be unfit to live in. So they found mold and leaking water and all these code issues. And so then everything kind of stalled, had to obviously reassess. So at first the state said that they were going to rebuild the defective homes, sort of strip them down, rebuild.
Which is basically like building a stick.
Exactly. Yeah. Try to clean out all the mold, I
Yeah.
guess. And then 7 months later, they changed course and said, never mind, we're just going to replace all the homes instead. And so then they spent $17 million on 118 new homes for Royal Oaks, which obviously pushed the process back a lot. The state has said that the problem with the defective homes was their construction, not the fact that the homes had been sitting and waiting to find a site. The state has actually sued the manufacturer and the broker. That case is still ongoing in court. But basically, here we are. It's just over 5 years after the anniversary of the Almeda Fire. There are some people who are still living in hotels and other transitional housing. So there's sort of this collective, not shrug going on, but people are like, I don't know what went wrong, but we need to do better next time.
5 years is a long time to not have a permanent
It
place
is.
to call home.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, what's happening at Royal Oaks now?
Yeah, so the state has tried to make up some of the millions of dollars it lost on these defective homes. They've auctioned off about half of them, trying to recoup some of that money. They're still making a plan for what to do with the other half of the homes. Not sure what their plan is there. But at Royal Oaks, some of the new homes have been placed on site and people have moved back in. So it's sort of reopened. There's some life getting back into Royal Oaks. I went and walked around there, and there's a lot of construction going on. There's a new playground that looks really nice. Someone was out watering the plants. Apparently 9 people have moved in so far. There are another 40 people sort of in the works in the application process of getting ready to move in. They're still taking applications. The nonprofit Access is working on that. So if you're listening and want to live at Royal Oaks, they're prioritizing former Royal Oaks residents and then fire survivors from other mobile home parks, and then homeowners and renters who were displaced by the fire. And you have to earn less than 80% of the area median income. So if that sounds like you and you want to live at Royal Oaks, they're still accepting applications. They've got 40 homes that are on site right now, ready for move-in. They've got 40 more to be expected by Christmas. They're sort of doing it in 3 rounds. And then the final group of residents is supposed to move in next year after those homes are ready.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like so many people are still looking for housing. I'm sure those will fill up.
Exactly. Yeah. Although I spoke with someone at Access who was saying that some people are just getting kind of fed up and exhausted, and they've had family members pass away or they've gotten ill and they just can't imagine moving again. And so part of her job is trying to keep people's hope alive and that you can have a permanent home, because 5 years later people are just getting kind of fed up and tired.
Yeah. Who want to be? Well, one of your main sources for this story was a woman named Mary. Can you tell us about her?
Yeah, Mary Martin was so lovely to talk to. She had used to live at Royal Oaks, lived there for just over 7 years, I think, and she really loved it there. She had these big windows, she had a pool, she had neighbors that she loved, and she really loved living there. And then, obviously, the Almeda Fire happened, and she unfortunately lost everything, including her black cat, Cambria, which is really heartbreaking. And so I spoke with her this summer, and she's basically been bouncing around, like we said, for the past 5 years since the fire. She was at a friend's house. She was in a FEMA trailer for a while. She had an apartment. And then earlier this year, she finally got approved for a state grant, and she recently purchased her own manufactured home in Ashland. So she's moved. She's settling in there and has a more permanent home now. She had planned to stay at Royal Oaks forever and die there. She said she really loved it. And but now she has a new spot. She has 2 new cats. She's definitely, in talking to her, still sort of adjusting to that process and having a new permanent home and sort of working through the trauma of the fire 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because even though 5 years have passed to her, she was like, it just feels like yesterday. It hasn't faded at all.
I think that's a sentiment you hear from a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just, everyone who was here, I wasn't here 5 years ago, but people talk about it like it was just yesterday. It's so vivid. And everyone that I talked to for this story said that the recovery hasn't been quite as quick as they had thought. The community has really banded together and done a lot, but the housing hasn't bounced back, and so it's just taking longer than maybe people expected. So
Yeah.
for Royal Oak, some people have returned, and some people like Mary have gone elsewhere and are moving on.
Well, thanks, Jane. And Justin, you had a story on how emergency responses changed after the Almeda fire. First, what was the emergency response like during Almeda?
Yeah, that was interesting to learn about. Yeah, like Jane, I wasn't in the valley back then. I've only been here for a couple of years, but I heard about the fire, right when I moved here and what to do if there's another fire. Actually, my first time visiting the station, I was showed our closet with supplies that we
Same here.
yeah, that we might use in evacuation. I was also shown how to sign up for alerts, which is important not only for our job but also for my own safety. And so for this story, I spoke with locals and first responders and city officials, Ashland city officials, to see what has changed since the fire and what it was like 5 years ago. One of the big areas which has changed, in theory at least, is and hopefully in practice, is the evacuation. So the evacuation was pretty hectic 5 years ago. Firefighters were very busy actually fighting that fire and keeping it from spreading. The city of Ashland was sort of understaffed in terms of evacuation officials, and there just wasn't a lot of direction for where to go in an event like this. So many people ended up evacuating actually multiple times. They would go to the town over and then the town over and see that the fire was still spreading. And also at that time, there weren't official evacuation zones for Jackson County.
Well, many didn't even receive an alert to evacuate. Is that right?
Yeah, and as JPR reported on at the time, many didn't get alerts to evacuate. So actually, the police ended up going door to door telling people to leave, which saved many lives. And also, citizens also spread the word, which is another huge part of this. But so that's changed. So Jackson County has retooled their alert system, and they've designated official evacuation zones. You can sign up for that at Jackson Alerts. I recommend people do that. Ashland also hired Kelly Burns as the city's emergency management coordinator. He was a firefighter during Almeda, and his position didn't exist in 2020. So they've added that position to aid in evacuation.
Well, what else has changed in response to a large fire?
It looks like coordination between fire departments has been sort of streamlined. I spoke with Jackson County Fire District 5's chief, and he said 5 years ago, fire engines were still mostly relying off kind of like whiteboards and the hoods of their vehicles to determine which resources should go where. Now every engine has a GPS and a tablet, and they can more easily see who's closest to a fire, because when a big fire like this occurs, it's sort of all hands on deck. So anyone nearby is expected to respond. And that will likely happen faster with this new coordination and technology.
I remember we had maybe a little story a few months ago about how they'd hardened some of their fire trucks, like underneath,
Right.
for fighting wildfire type situations. You also spoke to a very prepared Ashland local. Can you talk about the importance of individual preparedness?
Yeah, very, very quickly. That's a huge part of this, is to be prepared on the individual level. And I spoke to someone with a go bag, which officials recommend people have. And that basically includes anything you would like to take very quickly in an evacuation, so you don't have to think about that. But that's a huge part of this, is individual preparation. And yeah, that's not, you can't really rely off someone coming to get you in these big fires.
So get that go bag, keep your car filled up, and have a plan, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, we have a goodbye to say today to Emma J. It's your last day of your internship, your Snowden internship at JPR. What's been the favorite story you've covered here so far?
The favorite story, I have to say, the one that's come out is the one that I just did on Gateway.
You just heard about it, right?
Yeah, you
here.
just heard about it. You just got an in-depth analysis of it. The favorite one I'm not covering, but it hasn't come out yet, but I got to spend a day with Jane exploring Roseburg and kind of interacting with the homeless population there about a piece that she's been working on for quite a bit. And early on in my internship, that kind of just set the tone for the entire process, and everything has been just fantastic since then. I really enjoyed that.
Well, what's next for you?
Well, I'm going to a radio station in Michigan.
Yay, staying in public radio.
I'm staying in public
We got
radio.
the print person turned to public radio.
There you go. You never know what'll happen if you try something new, you guys. And you can just say that I fell in love. So going to Michigan.
Wow. Well, congratulations, Jane, and we'll miss you.
I'm not Jane.
Oh, Jane, Emma J. Sorry.
I'll miss you too.
Yeah, you'll miss Jane.
I'll miss
too.
Jane.
Your time together. Oh, that's classic me. That's it for the debrief this week. Thanks for listening. You can reach the newsroom with comments on our coverage and suggestions for things we should cover in the future through our news tip line. That's on our website at ijpr.org. And you can find the program and more at jeffexchange.org. on your favorite podcast platform.